Hello everyone and welcome to this Total Education lecture. We'd like to remind you that these lectures are brought to you for free, so if you'd like to help us out, give us a like down below. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the space below. And of course, don't forget to visit our website, totaleducationcentre.com.au. At the website you'll find teacher resources if you're a teacher, and of course there are student notes that go along with these lectures that will help and assist you in any examination situation. So don't forget, visit the website totaleducationcentre.com.au. Hello, I'm Bruce Pattinson from Total Education Centre, and I wanted to talk to you today about some of the ideas in Brave New World that all add up together to make up the whole political stratosphere, shall we say, of Brave New World, and some of the narrative techniques that Huxley uses to convey those ideas. And I begin by talking about the ideas, and later in the lecture we'll move to those narrative techniques. So if you already think you know the ideas and you want to skip through and go straight to those narrative techniques, you could probably do that now. The main idea behind Huxley's work was to create a dystopian vision of the future. And I think that dystopian vision is conveyed very clearly. He wanted to satirize in many ways what he saw as humanity destroying what he thought was most valuable in civilized society. And we talked in that first lecture in the context about some of the things of how that evolved through his reaction to what was happening in his own society. He satirizes, of course, here the raising up of false gods. He satirizes the assumption that we can do better than nature. And he shows us how what they've done is really destroy what's most valuable in our society. The opening chapter immediately sort of sets us on the right track, and he conveys those ideas very clearly. And he asks us to consider our position in many of those things, and some of those ideas that combine to form this whole ecosystem of the Brave New World are family, fertility, relationships, the patriarchy, the role of education and conditioning, and the castes of people. And he wants us to think about those things and determine where we stand on those things. And he tries to guide us as we read the novel through those sorts of issues. Now, we know that the Brave New World is a society based on stability. And what is that stability? Where does it stem from? Is this probably the most important political question in it? But let's have a look at some of the ideas that he discusses and build on those before we have a look at that. So let's have a think about the first thing. He talks about eugenics, okay, and how we create life, and we've taken all the nature out of life. We've taken away the sex, we've taken away reproduction, we've taken away birth, we've taken away nurturing. So we've taken away all those things, and what have we replaced it with? Not much, really. He talks about biotechnology, and that's very relevant to today's society. And as we go through this, you need to think about, it's an old novel. It was set in a different period of time. It is in the future, yes, but are those issues still relevant to us today? Well, obviously with biotechnology and the mapping of the human genome, all those things are becoming and are still very, very relevant to our society today, and we need to consider our position on those. And they're using it as a political tool in this novel to cast people into various roles in life without having any hope of change and alteration. What else is it about this novel? There are some very seductive things in the novel. The idea of constant peace, the idea of constant happiness. And Huxley points out that there's a cost to these, and we need to determine whether the cost is too high and that loss of individuality is too high. And of course he gives us that wonderful contrast with the reservation, where they have those sorts of freedoms that they don't have in the Brave New World, but he also points out there's an extremely high cost to those. How does he do that? He drags us back into sort of familiar elements of our world, doesn't he? There's many similarities in our world and the Brave New World. The sport's the same. There are still, you have different elements of society that we can marry with our world. So it's dystopian, it's in the future, but there's still touchstones. And I think those touchstones are extremely important in allowing us to empathise with what's happening in the novel. What else? Characters. Characters are very similar to people we know in the world today, but different enough to make it exciting and the narrative very interesting. And we can put he takes characters and he draws on elements of people that you and I probably know already, or people we've seen in the media and society, and he looks at those and exposes those sorts of flaws in our leadership, and with that sense of political power as well. We still have universal themes in it, the ideas, for example, of love and how people develop those, the idea of that sense of thematic concern with love that flows through. And there are other universal themes, and those sort of bring the world closer to us, that sense of individuality and hope and all those sorts of things. There has been some criticism as we talk about the idea of globalization, for example, and the criticism of globalization is it makes the loss of the nation state, it makes everybody conform. And I think Huxley picked that up very, very early in the piece, and he wouldn't have used the term globalization, but it's a term that we use now, and I think he saw that very early. We can also see it just before we leave these ideas that the flawed last third, you need to think how he positions that last third of the novel in context of the political situation. And a lot of it is a philosophical discussion and the end of John. And you need to think how that fits in with the basic thesis that he creates early in the start. We can also think about how he does this. And obviously it's a prose fiction text, science fiction satire. So you can put those little pockets in your head and think, what do they convey and what do they bring them? Again, it's prose fiction, science fiction and satire. And you need to work out for those, obviously, definitions of your own and work out what each one of those things bring to the text and how he uses each of those things to draw out these ideas and create this wonderful world that's held together with this sort of very simple political system, but also very complex in the way it's been manipulated and how it takes away our individuality and freedoms. The third person narration is one of the narrative techniques, of course, and I've already talked about that sense of satire and the humour in the novel. There's a sense of irony, sarcasm, parody and exaggeration, and you need to work through those and look for specific examples of those and what they do and how they compose those things. There's, of course, lots of repetition in there, images, and look for the scientific jargon and technical language. And you see that very early in the text in that first chapter when he talks about in vitro and they go through the factory and he talks about the different techniques, the Bokanovsky technique and all those sorts of things, and how he builds on that to create this sense of science in the world and a sense of control through scientific manipulation. The juxtaposition of the two worlds. So we're looking at the brave new world, the sense of order and cleanliness and society, versus the reservation where it's wild and there's still God and lawlessness and ritual and sickness and disease and all those sorts of things that have been eliminated in the brave new world and the civilized aspects of society. So there's that lovely contrast, and then again you get the juxtaposition of moving John and his mother into that environment. Now we all know that she dies, from overdosing on soma, basically, so she can just barely cope in the world that she once was a part of. And John doesn't certainly ever fit into that system again and goes off and eventually suicides. Oh, that was a plot spoiler for you. He eventually suicides in the tower at the end. The characterization and the parallels between the different characters is very interesting, and we'll talk about characters in the next lecture. But that generally gives you an overview of some of the ideas in it, how they build, some of the narrative techniques, and how all those come together later on. In other lectures on this novel, we'll talk about very specifically the political situation in the novel, and we'll again go back to characters and build on those sorts of ideas. So look out for those lectures in the future. I'm Bruce Pattinson. If you have any suggestions or ideas or any questions, please don't hesitate. We're always happy to talk to you, or you can give us a question or look through the Facebook page. Thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Goodbye.